Have you ever felt like something inside you died? And the worst part is, you didn't even notice? You wake up, work, smile, post, and yet something essential feels destroyed. You move, but you don't live. You breathe, but you don't feel. You smile, but everything looks gray. It's the kind of pain that doesn't bleed, but erodes the soul. The kind of silence that doesn't calm, but deafens. And the most terrifying thing? You don't even realize you've fallen into the limbo of your own existence. We live surrounded by voices, yet we're alone inside. Connected to everyone, but disconnected from ourselves. And this is what it leads to. A silent despair disguised as normal life. Days turn into routines. Gestures become automatic. And slowly, you become the character you learn to play. I'm fine. I'm just tired. It'll pass. But deep down, something inside you is begging to be heard. That's the point where most people give up. But it's also the exact point where life can finally begin. Because the void is not the end. It's the beginning of who you truly are. It's the chaos before the catharsis. 3 men, 3 different eras, the same emptiness. Viktor Frankl, Søren Kierkegaard, Albert Camus. Each of them faced the same silence and survived to describe it. Frankl, in the middle of war, amidst the smoke of the dead and the walls of concentration camps, discovered that life still has meaning. If you can find a why, even in hell. Kierkegaard, alone in his room, wrote that despair is the sickness of the soul, the disease of those who trade their true selves for shallow faith and the illusion of stability. And Camus, staring into the absurd of existence, declared, "To ever downed, even when life has no meaning, to live is still an act of rebellion." Haventu. They weren't speaking about distant philosophy. They were describing what millions still feel today. That strange sense of being alive, but hollow inside. That urge to disappear without wanting to die. That confusing mixture of apathy and anxiety that no one else seems to understand. This is the human despair. The inner absence. The moment when we lose ourselves from ourselves. And understanding that changes everything. Because what looks like the end is only the beginning of awakening. When life loses its light, the ego switches to survival mode. It doesn't want you to feel. It just wants you to function. So it builds substitutes, tasks, goals, masks. You stop being someone alive and become someone efficient. The ego, that part of your mind that builds defenses to keep you safe and in control, wants to keep you busy so you never have to truly listen to yourself. But the more it tries to protect you, the more it traps you. It becomes you against yourself, fighting for freedom. You become a prisoner of performance, mistaking movement for purpose. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how, but when the why disappears, the how becomes torture. You start existing by inertia, and the ego whispers, fake it, smile, work harder, prove yourself." But each time you lie to yourself, the void grows a little more. This is not just psychology, it's survival in a world on fire. The ego no longer guards us only from our impulses or guilt. It now tries to survive the speed of the modern world. We're bombarded with data, images, algorithms, and opinions, telling us who we should be. And the ego, desperate to keep up, builds a digital armor, a performance identity shaped to please, to prove, to belong. It decides what we show and what we hide. It convinces us to look stable, productive, happy, even when we're falling apart inside. The ego was born to protect us from inner chaos, but now it tries to shield us from the chaos of the world. And in that desperate race for control and validation, it loses itself, and we lose ourselves with it, until the light within us can no longer escape the gravity of that inner black hole. Despair rarely shows up as pain. It wears masks. Sometimes it looks like exhaustion that never fades. Sometimes like constant boredom. Sometimes like a life full of things, but empty of meaning. You run all day, but deep down, you know you're not going anywhere. And at night, when the world goes silent, in the darkness of your room and your mind, the muted scream of despair returns. It's there, in the insomnia, in the tight chest, in the question the soul whispers. Is life still worth living? Kierkegaard said that the desperate man is the one who lives outward but forgets to look within. He looks for answers in the world when the real problem is losing the path back to himself. And when despair grows, the ego invents distractions. Social media, quick pleasures, pornography, toxic productivity, performative spirituality, substance abuse, all of it just to avoid the real problem, the existential void. But the truth is, what hurts isn't the void itself. It's the desperate attempt to fill it with what will never be enough. It's being alive in the body, but dead in the spirit. This is where the danger begins. When the void stretches on and meaning disappears, the soul begins to collapse. What was once silence turns into apathy, hopelessness, emotional numbness. The ego becomes the soil, where the seed of the void grows, and its fruit is depression. Viktor Frankl called it the existential vacuum. When life loses purpose, pain no longer has direction. It becomes only weight. Kierkegaard called it the sickness unto death, the despair of a soul that has drifted away from its true self and tries to live a life that isn't its own. That disconnection between the real self and the social self creates an anguish that, if ignored, becomes total hopelessness. Camus went further. He said the void is inevitable. The world is indifferent. Life is absurd. But while depression paralyzes, facing the absurd sets you free. Camus offers a way out, not by denying the void, but by walking straight through it, with awareness and revolt. The difference is subtle, but decisive. The depressed are swallowed by silence. The awakened learn to walk inside it. When the soul gets sick, the ego dresses up as strength. The ones who look the most confident are often the most broken. The ones who preach virtue the loudest are usually fighting chaos within. The ones who say, "I don't care," are often the ones who care too much. The ego creates characters: the tireless worker, the calm intellectual, the happy performer. But none of them are you. Most people don't lie out of cruelty. They lie out of fear, fear of not being loved once they show who they really are. So they keep saying, "I'm fine," until their body starts to speak for them. Insomnia, anxiety, irritability, emptiness. Nietzsche once said, "Every deep spirit needs a mask." And he was right. Masks protect, but they also suffocate. There comes a moment when the body says what the mouth can no longer hide. Frankl would say, that's the soul asking for a new meaning. There comes a point when distraction stops working. You try to fill the hole with everything: success, pleasure, religion, recognition, but nothing fits. And when the silence begins to scream, the truth emerges. You are alive, but not awake. Camus called this the awakening of the absurd, the moment when a person realizes the world has no answers, but chooses to keep living anyway. That's the turning point. Meaning isn't something you find. It's something you create when you face the void directly. Frankl said that suffering only destroys those who never find purpose within it. But once you understand your pain, it becomes direction. And that's exactly where most people run. Because silence is unbearable for those who've lived their whole lives. Numbed, the mind tries to escape. The ego searches for shortcuts, and the body begs for noise. But the more you run, the more the void follows. Silence doesn't speak with words. It speaks through symptoms, through exhaustion without reason, through the lack of joy in things that once moved you, through that quiet feeling that nothing is ever enough, even when everything seems in place. The soul doesn't crave perfection. It craves presence. It craves meaning. It just wants to be heard. And the void isn't the enemy. It's the teacher. It forces you to stop, to look, to choose again. Because sometimes you have to lose everything, even the noise, to finally hear the sound of your own truth. The meaning of life isn't found. It's built. It's born when pain turns into awareness. Frankl saw it in the horror of Auschwitz. People who had lost everything, except the freedom to choose how they would respond. And it's true. In the middle of chaos, many discover what truly matters. The mother who loses her child and turns her grief into strength to comfort others. The man who collapses, and from that collapse, creates something that keeps others from giving up. The woman who hits rock bottom and learns to see beauty, even in what once hurt. There, between horror and hope, Frankl understood no one can steal the meaning of someone who creates it from within. Purpose isn't a gift from life. It's a choice before it. Kierkegaard said that despair is the moment when a person realizes they've lost themselves, but it's also the moment when rebirth becomes possible. Despair is the mirror of the soul, and those who dare to face it begin to rebuild themselves from the inside out. For Kierkegaard, the rediscovery of meaning happens when the self stops running from what it is and reconnects with something greater, whether it's God, truth, or the spirit itself. It's the leap that's born from the fall, not a blind leap of faith, but one of trust, a surrender of control, to rediscover essence. Camus saw it differently. For him, meaning isn't found in metaphysical answers, but in consciousness itself. The world is silent, indifferent, and yet we keep living. That act alone, that insistence on living, is the purest form of revolt. To live is to challenge the void, to push Sisyphus's stone uphill, knowing it will roll back down, and still smile. Camus called it lucid rebellion, the moment when a person understands that life doesn't need meaning to be worth living, that the value of existence lies in the act itself, to feel, to create, to love, even without guarantees. Kierkegaard and Camus looked in opposite directions, but saw the same horizon. One said, leap into faith. The other said, stay within the absurd. But both meant the same thing. Choose to live consciously. Meaning isn't a map. It's movement. It's the step you take in the dark, the yes you repeat every day, even without a promise of reward, even tired, even lost, even without hope. On the other side, there are no certainties, only presence, no promises, only significance. Meaning lives in small things, in the eyes of someone who listens without judgment, in the art that heals, in the pain that forces you to become more human, in that simple moment when you realize you can still love after being broken. Camus would say, "The true hero is the one who finds freedom, even within the absurd." And Kierkegaard would answer, "Faith is the paradox, the absurd act of believing when everything seems lost. The rediscovery of meaning is not a return to who you were. It's the birth of who you've always been, the self that exists after the pain, the self that no longer needs to prove anything. Because in the end, life was never about finding answers. It was about having the courage to hold the questions. And in that silent, humble moment, the soul breathes again. Not because everything got better, but because finally, you understand." The ego lives on control. The soul lives on surrender. The ego is the character. You learned to play, to survive. The soul is the silence that watches it all, without needing to defend itself. While the ego tries to control the world, the soul simply observes. And when the ego falls silent, fear loses its voice, and consciousness awakens. Kierkegaard called this moment the reconciliation of the self with itself. It's when a person stops fighting who they are and, for the first time, accepts themselves completely, light and shadow, strength and fragility. For him, that's what true faith is. Not blind belief in something external, but deep trust in oneself, even in the face of the absurd. It's the soul's leap into its own abyss, and the discovery that there is an invisible ground. Frankl called this inner freedom. He believed that even in pain, a human being can still choose their stance toward life. It's the freedom not to react through fear, but to respond through meaning. When the ego falls silent, this space opens up, a space no external prison can touch. The soul becomes free, not because everything is fine, but because nothing defines it anymore. Camus saw it as lucid rebellion. To silence the ego is to face the absurd with serenity. It's to accept that life doesn't need a reason to be beautiful. It's to stop demanding answers from the universe and instead to live fully within the mystery. Lucid rebellion is the courage to keep loving even knowing nothing lasts. It's the silence that never surrenders, the stillness that keeps creating. Three thinkers, three different paths, one same truth. Consciousness is born the moment the ego gets tired of pretending, and when that happens, something shifts. The need for approval fades. The fear of failure dissolves. The obsession with being right disappears, and the void that once terrified you becomes space. Pain doesn't vanish. It turns into wisdom. The silence that once oppressed you becomes home, and the soul finally speaks, not through words, but through presence. It doesn't say, "I won." It whispers, "I understood," because the real victory is not conquering the world. It's making peace with your own being. And when that happens, life, for the first time, stops being a battle and becomes a quiet act of love. Maybe despair isn't the end of the road. Maybe it's the beginning of clarity. Because only when everything loses meaning do you start to create your own. Camus said, "We must imagine Sisyphus happy. pushing his stone every day, not because he expects to reach the top, but because he learned to love the climb itself. The void didn't come to punish you. It came to free you. It's the space between who you were and who you can become. But how do you step out of this limbo? How do you stop being a prisoner of the ego and start feeling life again for real? The first step is to stop running from silence. Not the silence outside, the one within. Listen to what hurts. Name what scares you. The ego feeds on denial. The soul blooms through acceptance. Then, relearn how to be present. The small things are the antidote to emptiness. Air on your skin, the smell of coffee, the sound of laughter. The mind chases infinity. The soul lives in the now. Create meaning instead of chasing it. Do something that connects you to life, even if it's small. Write, walk, hug, pray, draw, help someone. Purpose isn't a grand idea. It's the small act that reminds you you're still alive. And finally, allow yourself to feel. Pain, doubt, joy, fear, all belong to the same field. Those who try to live only in the light end up burning. The shadow also has something to teach. Frankl said that when suffering finds meaning, it stops being mere pain. Kierkegaard saw despair as the beginning of faith, the moment when the self begins to recognize itself again. And Camus, the man of the absurd, called this freedom. Continuing, even without guarantees. 3 perspectives, one same truth. Accept what is, to awaken what can be. Because the void only imprisons those who fear it. But whoever crosses it finds peace. And when the ego finally goes silent, you realize the soul never stopped speaking. It was just waiting for the moment you would stop to listen. The void is not the end. It's the birth of your truth. If this video touched you, leave your reflection in the comments. Write what you felt or which part of your journey it reminded you of. Sometimes, a single word of yours can be the bridge for someone still trapped in silence. In the next video, we'll keep exploring the deeper layers of the human mind and soul, especially that space where the weight of others' eyes and expectations begins to shape who we think we are. Maybe it's time to understand not only the void within us, but also the mirror the world reflects back at us. If you'd like to suggest themes, reflections, or questions you'd like to see here, write them in the comments. Your voice helps shape this path. If you want to continue this journey, you'll find additional readings and reflections in the commentary for those who wish to understand themselves more deeply. And before you go, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share what existential emptiness has taught you about yourself. Because when everything loses meaning and the world fades, the void stares back at you, not to destroy you, but to return you to yourself. The void is not the end. It's the birth of your truth.